Canto 4, 18, 20. Anechamai no mayam antardan bhutamanam mayam prakalpya vatsante duduhur daran namayim. Translation: others, also the inhabitants of planets known as Kimpurusha Loka, made a demon Maya into a calf, and they milked out mystic powers by which one can disappear immediately from another's vision and appear again in a different form. Purport: it is said that the inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka can perform many wonderful mystic demonstrations. In other words, they can exhibit as many wonderful things as one can imagine. The inhabitants of this planet can do whatever they like or whatever they imagine. Such powers are also mystic powers. The possession of such mystic power is called Isita. The demons generally learn such mystic powers by the practice of yoga. In the Dasamaskanda 10th Canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a vivid description of how the demons appear before Krishna in various wonderful forms. For instance, Bakasura appeared before Krishna and his cowherd boys as a gigantic crane. While present on this planet, Lord Krishna had to fight with many demons who could exhibit the wonderful mystic powers of Kimpurusha Loka. Although the inhabitants of Kimpurusha Loka are naturally endowed with such powers, one can attain these powers on this planet by performing different yogic practices. Okay, so this verse is simply describing more results that can be attained in this world, which we generally call mystic powers. In this case, it is described that one can disappear in one form and appear in a different form. So generally, of course, forms are not too changeable in this world. We are born with one form and it grows up. That's a little bit of a transformation, but we can't change into a completely different form. If we're born as a human, we can't become a dog or whatever like that. We remain as a human being throughout our life. So that's a general principle. If by karma we take one body, we're stuck with that body. However, some people like to have a little variety. So they can actually change their bodies. But this is not a permanent change. This is a temporary change. And in many cases, simply an illusory change. So it is not very satisfying also. And here it describes how some more or less demoniac people can use this power to their advantage. Just as in the modern world, people can disguise themselves and do various crimes. So the demons can, for various purposes, can disguise themselves. And we see examples in Krishna's pastimes, the demon describing making himself into a calf, Vatsasura, or Putana, who was a huge giant demoness, suddenly turns into an attractive gopi and tries to feed Krishna. And of course, Prabhupada mentions here Bakasura. So we have many, many demons in Krishna's pastimes who were actually just demons, but then they took different animal forms or whatever to try to fool Krishna. Of course, this is a type of Maya, and Krishna is the greatest of the yogis. So he can surpass whatever these demons do. And we see that when Krishna kills a demon, like Putana, they revert to their original form. So when Krishna sucked the poison out of Putana, he sucked out her, or she tried to put the poison in his mouth. He sucked out her life air. And then suddenly she transformed. She was no longer a beautiful gopi. She was a huge demoness that expanded for, I don't know, 7 kroshas or something. and it crashed the trees and things around the whole area. So she could not maintain that one form. It was not a permanent acquisition. She changed back to her other form after some time. So this is generally how these powers work. For some time, you can attain that body, but then you have to come back to your original body again. In some cases, it's more or less illusory. Demons can create illusions, as we see Salva created many illusions when he was fighting with Krishna. And we see also the demons fighting with the yakshas, fighting with Dhruva. They created many illusions also. And then, of course, the devotees and Krishna are not bewildered by that, so they can see through the illusion immediately, and then they can fight more vigorously. So these powers are temporary and often cases simply illusory, and therefore not very useful or satisfying. This, of course, simply underlies a more broader illusion. Everyone is trying to be satisfied in their particular body within this material universe. The body is certainly real, and we try to get satisfaction that way. But also, we cannot really be satisfied. One reason, of course, is it's also not permanent. We assume this body for some time, then we have to give it up. So these persons with mystic powers, they can attain somebody, they have to give it up and revert to their other body. However, that is not the case with us giving up our bodies at death. We don't choose what body we get next, and it's no permanent body there. All the bodies are impermanent. So we simply get another body by the law of karma. And we don't get a real choice in that. So in this way, we're forced into another body. So the situation is a little different. We have impermanent bodies, but we're forced to take another body. So in any case, it's dissatisfying. One is impermanent. The second is the whole case of accepting another body is also unnatural to the jiva. So the material body, subtle and gross, is called a covering on the jiva. And it obstructs his knowledge. It obstructs his natural qualities of bliss. So therefore, because it is unnatural, no matter how much we try to enjoy with anybody in this material world by doing good karmas, we become frustrated since it's not natural. So therefore, whatever enjoyments we get out of our body, even if we have good karma, it is not really satisfying. So for these two reasons, one is not natural, second, it is not eternal. The jivas are unsatisfied with all the different bodies they get in this material world. So we can see that this attempt to change your body, etc., by the yogis, this is an attempt to change their body because they will get some more enjoyment out of another body. But we see that even if they could change into any material body, it will not be satisfying. So the demons can change their body temporarily. If we are a little more clever, then we can think of getting a little more permanent situation to enjoy, and that is we do punyas. And then when we die, we get a better body. So you can go to Svargaloka or Brahmaloka by doing a lot of punyas. So that's definitely a better way to get a body which is more enjoyable than simply exercising powers as a demon, which gives temporary enjoyment only. You can get a long-lasting body that way. But as Krishna also says in Bhagavad Gita, that's also temporary. And even Brahma has to give up his body. So that this whole attempt to get better bodies is frustrated in the material world. So this whole idea to get these mystic powers to get different bodies, this is also useless. It's also described how the yogis then, they can do something else. through their powers, after they die, they go to a higher planet and they try to elevate themselves further and further up so they can go to Svargaloka and Janaloka, Tapaloka, and Brahmaloka. But that again is some temporary phenomena. And again, whatever body they get, they have to leave ultimately. Yeah. So whether it's a yogic body like this, the Kim Purushas get, or whether it is a more long-lasting body through punyas, it all ends up in frustration. So that we should understand and not be attracted to any of these, either the punyas or to the yogic powers, etc. So these persons are described as demons here. They're trying to do this, appear and disappear or whatever, which means that they get these powers and they misuse them. They use it to bewilder and cheat other people. So that makes that acquisition of the body even worse, because by doing this, they accrue bad karmas, and therefore they have to suffer further in other lifetimes. So of course, because the jivas do have desires, the Lord makes arrangements so the jivas can fulfill those desires, and therefore we get situations like that where the Kim Purushas get bodies where they can change their body, etc. And so the Lord fulfills everyone's desires, and He gives them particular bodies, also taking in mind their karmas, and in this way they can get some sort of superficial enjoyment in this material world. All this is material, temporary, and ultimately without meaning. So all the planets in the material world, of course, all these planets are material, and they have material. The inhabitants have material bodies, and so we can conclude that they're all actually an illusion because they're getting material bodies. If they were under illusion, they wouldn't take a birth in this material world. So all under illusion. So all subject to some sort of maya. So whether it's the Kim Purushas getting bodies that can change into other bodies, etc., all useless. On the other hand, we can also strive for another type of body, that is a spiritual body. And of course, it's debatable. Some will say no more bodies because bodies are temporary material. And what is the proof you get a body when you get liberated? But if we go by Bhagavatam and Mahabharata and other scriptures, we learn that you can give up your body, get a spiritual body. That was the case with Ajamil. After he recovered from the Yamadutas, he practiced bhakti in Haridwar. And then finally, the Vishnudutas came and they took him, and he got a four-arm form in Vaikuntha. So he didn't merge into Brahman and become formless. He actually got a body in the spiritual world. That was the result of doing bhakti. So by the process of bhakti, yes, we can also transform and get another form, but we get an eternal form, which is not even material, which is spiritual. So that's a better alternative. If we're trying to get a better and better body, better get a spiritual body. But it requires a particular technique. And as Bhagavatam says, there's billions of living entities with different types of bodies. And rarely some become human beings. And among the human beings, some will practice dharma, whatever. And among those, some will strive for liberation. Among those, a few will get liberation, that is, merge in Brahman. But rarer than that, out of even the rare persons who get liberation, rarer than that is a devotee of the Lord. And then, of course, rarer than that is a devotee of Krishna. So very, very rare. But if one happens to do that, then one gets this result of getting the best body of all, that is a spiritual body. That body is eternal. That body has senses. So you can use your senses, and you can see and hear and smell and taste and everything, just like this body. but it's a different type of enjoyment. It is ananda, and that comes from serving the Lord without any material desires, without desires for our own enjoyment. Then we get prema and ananda. So this is different from that other material body because it's an expansion of the jiva himself. So it is not a covering. It is not some obstruction. It's not something that distorts the nature of the jiva. It's a natural development of the jiva. So therefore, that ananda that we feel in the spiritual body is natural to the jiva. It's not a covering at all. It's not an obstruction. In addition, if you want, you can change that body at will. So it is described in Brihad Bhagavatamrita that Gopakumar, when he was waiting outside Vaikuntha in order to see Vishnu, then he observed some of the devotees there going into the gates, etc. So some were changing their forms. So of course, different forms they had. Some had 4 forms, some had 10 heads, some had 8 heads, some had 20 heads, whatever. But they began to change their forms. Some became birds, some became animals, whatever. But then they would revert back to their form again. So that it illustrates that the devotee in the spiritual world could change his form if he wants to temporarily, just like these yogis do. So we know that Krishna is the master of all yogic powers. He has all siddhis naturally. So the devotee also in the spiritual world has that siddhi. He could change his body as he likes. But he, of course, he always prefers to come back to his main spiritual body in which he serves the Lord directly. So whatever is available in the material world, like changing your body temporarily, is also available in the spiritual world if you so desire that. So the Lord fulfills all the possible desires of the living entity in the spiritual world. And in this way, the jiva there gets the most bliss. So therefore, we shouldn't be attracted to the material variety, but rather to the spiritual variety. Kimpurusha is actually it literally means, is this a human being? Is this a Purusha? Is this a real person? Because they kind of look like human beings, but they're not human beings. They're a little different. So when you look at them, so, oh, are you a human or not? And there is a Kimpurusha Varsha. We have Varsha here. And then we have Hari Varsha and Kimpurusha Varsha and Kuru Varsha, etc. We have 9 Varshas on the middle Dvipa, Jambu Dvipa, in the Salt Ocean. This is described in the 5th canto. And each has different types of inhabitants. So we have the Kimpurusha Varsha, where the Kimpurushas reside. And they look kind of humanish, but also they're a little different. But they are described there as being like this is a heavenly planet. The other Varshas on Bhumandala and on the Jambudvip are considered to be Bhoma Svarga, which means heaven on earth, basically Svarga on earth on the Bhumandala. So we have Svarga up above, but we also have Svarga on our own level, that is in these different Varshas of Bhumandala and then the different Dvipas. So they get lots of enjoyment. And part of the enjoyment here is that the Kimpurushas, they get these mystic cities by which they can change their body into anything they want. So it's just another type of enjoyment which is available in other places, other living entities who have more powers than us. But again, whether it's Svargaloka or Brahmaloka or Bhumandala or hellish planets, the devotees don't strive for any of this. They simply strive to serve Supreme Lord. And whatever the Lord gives them, they accept that. So it is said that the devotee doesn't even aspire for a spiritual body. That is called sarupya, to get a form like the Lord's, a spiritual form, similar to the Lord's. So the devotee doesn't even demand or ask for a spiritual form or even a spiritual planet. He only desires to serve the Lord. But the Lord, in order for the devotee to do service, arranges for an eternal body, because you can't worship the Lord without a body. You can worship the Lord in the material world, but if you have a temporary material body, your service is going to be interrupted, then you have to get another body after some time. So the Lord awards the devotee an eternal body in which he can serve, even if the devotee doesn't ask. So with that body, then he can engage in different services. So the devotee doesn't demand or ask for it, but the Lord supplies it as say, a necessity for serving the Lord. How can we serve the Lord unless we have a particular form with senses? So the Lord does it. He supplies this to the devotee, appropriate to his service, even if we don't ask. Now, of course, we have a type of bhakti called Raganuga bhakti, in which, for Krishna particularly, the devotee aspires for a certain type of body because he wants to serve Krishna in that relationship. So if you aspire for Madhurya Rasa, that the body you get will be a gopi body or a manjari body. And if you aspire for Sakya Rasa, you aspire for a cowherd body. So part of the sadhana there is to meditate on that particular body, even though we don't have it yet. And by meditating on your body in which you would serve in the future, that body gradually develops. So that's what happens at Raganuga sadhana. However, if one is simply worshiping Vishnu, one doesn't really have a choice. There's only Dasya Rasa. So, and those devotees therefore simply aspire to be eternal servants of Vishnu or Narayana, but without even thinking about what type of body they're going to get. The Lord awards them an appropriate body to serve. So in many cases, they'll get a four-arm form, like the Vishnu Dutas, and they will serve in that particular body. So even if we don't think of the body, we actually get a body anyway by the mercy of the Lord. But the devotees worshiping Krishna, they're a little anxious to get a particular body to serve the Lord. So the Lord supplies that body which is suitable for that particular rasa. So that's where we get with Krishna, there's a choice of bodies and according to the rasa, and the Lord supplies that body or manifests that body for the jiva. But even though he supplies it, we shouldn't think that this is some created body. Everything is eternal in the spiritual world. So these bodies are also eternal somehow or other, but not manifested until we enter the spiritual world and we manifest that spiritual body. Okay, any question there?
Hare Krishna, everybody. You can make, if you have any questions or any other things, please ask Maharaj. He is ready to give your reply.
The last the verses were all about cities or etc. Now in the modern world, people are probably not interested in cities. We don't hear much talk about that even among the people who do yoga, etc. But in ancient times, this was quite prominent, and therefore in the Bhagavatam we have a whole discussion of cities in the 11th canto, all the different type of 20 or 22 cities you can attain through yoga practice. So in ancient times, people were quite aware of these cities and whatever, and then some people become attracted to them, and therefore they practice yoga or whatever to get these cities. Of course, nowadays, people are not so much interested in that, just as they're not interested in Svargaloka, which was also a big goal in ancient times, but nobody thinks about Svargaloka now. They only think of enjoying right now on earth in the next 10 years or so. They don't think about next lifetime or next lifetime. So some of the presentations in Bhagavatam maybe look a little bit outdated because people aren't even asking for these things or aspiring for these things.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam. There is a question on the box. Okay. And also Madhurya Amrita Devi wants to have a question.
Who's
He has raised a hand. Okay. Yes, Mataji, you can ask the question now.
Hi, Krishna. I was wondering, you were saying about the spiritual body, and I understand that we have spiritual senses. So is that spiritual body already with us in some way, but we can't perceive it?
Yes and no, because is it with us or not with us or whatever? In one sense, yes, because Krishna is always with us and everything's in Krishna, inside Krishna or outside Krishna or whatever. So, and everything is eternal. As I said, bodies are not really created because everything spiritual is eternal. So you can't create a spiritual body. It's eternal. But then where is my spiritual body now? Is it here with me, or is it in the spiritual world? But such questions are a little bit, we say, dualistic, materially dualistic. We're thinking this and that, and spiritual world and here, and existing and non-existing, created, not created, etc. This comes from our dualistic mentality. So everything in the spiritual world is eternal, everything's in the present, everything is not correct, nothing is created. But yet we're in the material world here, so I don't have my spiritual body, I got to make my spiritual body, or Krishna has to give it to me or something like that. So we think a little bit in terms of our time and space. But we can just say that it's eternal and it manifests somehow. Where it is, we don't know. Obviously, it's not in the part of the material world, it's spiritual, so it's ultimately in the spiritual world also. But it manifests as we get to the Baba stage and we enter into prema. That spiritual body manifests. So we can say by the mercy of Krishna, he lets it manifest for us. So, and because as Krishna awarding it, he understands exactly what particular body is most suitable to us. So we get that body, we're completely satisfied with it, and it's eternal. But where it is doesn't really matter.
Thank you.
If you practice jnana, you don't even develop it, never manifests. It's not there. The person for practicing jnana doesn't want a body at all. So Lord doesn't manifest it for him. It's not there.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, there is another question by Nitya Gopal Prabhu.
Oh, okay. What's that? What is the difference there? Okay. How can I expand this chat? Okay, well, what is the difference between the soul and the spiritual body that we are awarded? Meaning, is us as soul different from spiritual body? Well, we know that like Krishna has a spiritual body, but he's non-different from his body. We often say that, yeah. His body and his self are the same. We also have to say that about the jiva in the spiritual world. There's spiritual body and the atma are non-different. The jiva and the spiritual body are non-different. Because obviously everything's spiritual. And everything is eternal. So in that sense, there's no difference. But of course, we also say difference and non-difference. So even for Krishna, yes, his body is his self. But yet there is a little difference there because we say that the Supreme Lord manifests his body or his form and his name and his qualities and his pastimes through the Sandini Shakti. So they're kind of different coming out of a Sandini Shakti. But then we also say the Shakti and the Shaktiman, the possessor of the Shakti, Krishna, are non-different. So in that sense, his body and senses and pastimes and qualities are non-different from himself, but there's some sort of differentiation there. So this is what we would call Beda Bed. Difference and non-difference simultaneously exist in the Lord. So his body is kind of different from himself, but it is himself also. Like his qualities are different, but they are all himself also. So similarly for the jiva in the spiritual world, then the body and the atma are non-different, but there's difference in the sense that the it manifests particular form, etc., and qualities, etc., which are not exactly the self, but they're kind of attached to the self. We get the same mystery in the material world, because we'll say, okay, here's a water bottle. A water bottle. It has a form. It has qualities, like being made out of plastic, and it holds water and whatever, and it's got a blue cap on it. So these are its qualities, and it is a bottle. But we cannot say that the body, the bottle is the qualities. Actually, the qualities belong to the bottle. So there's a little difference. So we have all sorts of qualities, and we got the bottle. Now we could say, of course, the sum total of all the qualities of the bottle make the bottle. But then again, that doesn't look right also. It's not just qualities, because otherwise say we would just say an object is the sum of its qualities, but that doesn't sound very, logical also. So generally they define the object as having a sarup, and then the qualities kind of attached to it. And the qualities may change. And maybe a blue bottle and a red bottle or whatever, the size may change, whatever. So we have a form called bottle. And then we got different details which make it, transform it or make it a little bit unique. And those become its qualities. So there's a whole discussion in philosophy, Western and in Vedic philosophy, about quality and object and how they're related to each other. And it's a complicated subject. And nobody can come to agree on actually how they relate to each other. But that we say it's beta, actually. It's different and non-different. The quality of the object are different and non-different. So there's some problem with this in the material world, again in the spiritual world, but it's all resolved by the Achintya Shakti of the Supreme Lord.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very much for a wonderful class and all this information in regard to the spiritual and the material manifestations of our bodies. So you're mentioning that the Lord awards us a spiritual body so that our spiritual activities will be perfect with a spiritual body.
Yeah.
So in the material world, so is there like a gradation that some bodies are more suited for spiritual activities? Because we do read that the human body is very rarely attained, and that is most suited for spiritual practice. On the other hand, the same scriptures also tell us that the human body is compared to the other entities, living entities, other planets. It's very weak. It doesn't have the strong senses. It doesn't have the various mental powers. It's very weak compared to the other the bodies what the living entities have. Then how do you understand that the human body is perfect for spiritual practice? Like, why not those other bodies which are much more suited? Yeah.
When they talk about the human form being suitable for spiritual advancement, that's actually referring to the intelligence level of the human being, better than animals and plants. And because they do have that intelligence, they can begin to ask, who am I? Where am I going? What happens after death? They can make philosophical inquiry, and ultimately then they can distinguish soul from body. So because of a higher intelligence, the human being can do this. In this way, the human being is praised over their forms. Of course, when you talk about human being, that refers to the human being or any higher species, like the Devatas or the sages or people on Brahmaloka who have human-like forms also. So if they have that intelligence, then of course they are suitable. So in that sense, the human form is suitable. But to talk about one human form over another human form, that doesn't apply, because as Bhagavatam says, whether you're Brahma, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, Abhira, Pukasa, Chandala, Malecha, whatever body you have as among human beings, it doesn't really matter. You can practice bhakti and you can get the highest results. So any human body which has intelligence, can practice bhakti and get the highest results. So there's no differentiation there as far as human bodies are concerned. So, of course, yes, the human body is somewhat limited. And if the Devas have less limitation, they're more sattvic, they're more intelligent. And if we go to Brahma Loka, even better, etc. But at the same time, they're all unsuitable also because they're all material. We have material senses, material bodies, and therefore in our brains are material. So we're limited also. So there is no real perfection as far as getting human bodies in the material world or even Brahma's body in the material world. There's always a limitation because it is material. But in spite of that, if we do bhakti, that surpasses any material limitation of our body. So that's the saving grace for any material body and particularly human being. But of course, even the animals can get the mercy of Krishna and get bhakti also like Indra. But generally, it's the human beings who have higher intelligence, they get the opportunity.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I think Jade has one question, and she raised her hand, and now she's taken her back. So that you can make, Mataji, you can make the question put before the Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, thank you for your lessons. You kind of answered it in the previous answer before, but how do we overcome resentment of our current body? Because sometimes it happens.
How do we overcome? How do we overcome? I didn't hear the last part of the question.
How do we overcome resentment of our current body?
Oh, resentment of our human body. Well, as I said, no matter what body you get in the material world, it's ultimately not satisfying. So if we're unsatisfied with the present body for some reason, don't think that next, if you get another body, it's going to be better, because it'll have its pluses, it'll also have its minuses. So there is no perfect body in the material world. We simply have to accept that. But the good fortune is that if we take to the process of bhakti and get the mercy of Krishna and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that can override any disadvantage we have in this body. So that's our consolation. We don't have to feel dissatisfied with our present body or whatever. As we know, the great devotees always pray, let me simply serve you, Lord, in whatever body. Even if I'm an insect or a blade of grass or whatever, somehow if I can serve you, that is good fortune. So let me somehow be your devotee life after life. So the devotee doesn't really get attached to the body he's in. He surpasses that conception and simply tries to serve the Lord. There's a question here, elaborate on how and why different personalities taking body of caste is a achintya phenomena. Well, these are material things that are taking place here. So it's not like a Krishna's achintya shakti in the spiritual world where he can make, contrary things like that. But we can apply the achintya somewhat to the material world. Anything surprising we can call achintya also. If it's beyond the normal type of logic. So in that sense, we could call it achintya. But from the spiritual point of view, no, it's not achintya, because as we say, some people have yogic powers, and we may say, oh, that's phenomenal, that's achintya, but actually it's just some power of the mind or whatever he's using. So that's all these things that happen in the material world are manifested not through spiritual potency of the Lord, but through Maya and different jivas getting the ability to use Maya in extraordinary ways that look achintya for us, but actually it's all material. So it's not the same as Krishna's spiritual Shakti. Okay, fine.
Thank you, Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam. Thank you.
Okay, Hare Krishna.
Very nice lecture, informative lecture.
Sure.
And particularly, we should not be influenced by the influence of Maya. And whatever body we get, that is enough to if we remain in the path of bhakti, that is enough to lead us to the supreme abode of the Lord.
Yeah.
If we need for the mercy of the Gurus and the Vaishnavas.
Yes, certainly. Okay. Hare Krishna.
ईश्वरी राज भक्त भानु स्वामी महाराज की जय। श्री प्रभुपाद और भद्रवेश कृष्ण